Oh, community.
Community.
Community is...
What's it mean to have community?
I don't even know. Community is such a hard word now.
It seems to be the thing that everyone is chasing, but very few people know how to be a part of anymore. You know, it's a place where you experience life with one another and know you're accepted.
We need community.
If you're not known, you cannot be loved.
But we're definitely coming at this from different places.
Well, welcome back to the Grounded Presence Podcast, where together we're pursuing a deeply rooted existence. I'm Daniel Powell, and good grief, it's been a while. But never fear, we're back. We're going to continue Season 2, which is a collection of conversations about our shared desire for community. And fingers crossed, we're going to finish up the season without any more interruptions. Now, I've got an interview for you today with an excellent individual, Ryan Miller, who started up some really cool community in Denver, Colorado. But before we get down to that, I want you to come on a little journey with me. A journey back into community's past. Now, if we rewind the clock about 10 years ago, this is when one of my more profound moments in community occurred. And at this point in my life, I found myself in one of those hip modern churches. This was back when I still went to church. And you know these hip modern churches, you know the kind I'm talking about. They met in a warehouse, dimly lit, open ceilings. And you know, it was pretty minimalist in decoration and just overall concept. Except when it comes to the AV system. You know, they spared no expense on the AV system. We're talking 3 big old jumbotrons, huge speaker system, lights, lasers, the works. And if I'm not mistaken, I think there may have even been a fog machine or two that made their way into the mix occasionally. But when I dove into this church, it was during the uncomfortable transition between college and adulthood. I think some people take it a little bit better. You know, some people get that big flashy job and feel like they arrived. That wasn't me. I was kind of lost. I was a ship without a dock to tie up on. So many of the pals I ran around with, you know, in school and just earlier in life took different paths and moved away for jobs. And I found myself in need of some new friends. So that led me to dive into this church, you know, and young hip church. There's no problem finding some friends there. The other interesting thing about this young church is, you know, I think it's probably the first place that I really encountered intergenerational space with any real substance. And particularly it was at their monthly men's breakfast. And I had heard this breakfast mentioned in the weekly morning announcements for a really long time. But eventually something tugged at me and I wound up going. I definitely had my reservations, but once I went to this group, I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. And it was hard to describe. There was something special going on in these meetings that I couldn't quite put my finger on. But all I knew was that I was really getting a lot to be a guy in his early 20s, spending time around older men. You know, it's not a space that exists very often. But there's just something that felt like it was missing from my life. And it was a true intergenerational space. Once a month, there were about 40 guys who would meet up on a Saturday morning, age 18 to 80. And surprisingly, it was pretty well distributed across that age range. But I've been going to this group for a while, enjoying it, not quite being able to put my finger on why I enjoy it. And then one morning, one of the other young guys in the group makes this statement that just totally hits the nail on the head. So, you know, it was a pretty typical group. Basically what we do is we get together, eat some breakfast, go through this video series that we were watching, and then break off from that group of 40 guys maybe into 5 or 6 smaller table groups. So back to this young guy who makes this profound statement one morning. So we're sitting around our table, maybe 3 guys my age in their early 20s, 4 middle-aged guys, and a few who were in their 70s and maybe even a little older. So this young guy, something just hits him in the moment. And he says something like this. He says something like, I just want to tell you older guys that I really appreciate you letting us younger guys hang around. and being willing to share your wisdom, and just conveyed how much that meant to him, how much this space meant to him. And as soon as he said it, it was clear that he struck a chord with all the other young guys at the table, including me. And then another young guy joined in. He tacked on. He said, yeah, the stories you guys are sharing, they give me so much hope. They give me this feeling of, it's all going to be okay. It just feels like we're not in this alone, like somebody's been through everything that we're going through right now before us, and you've come out on the other side. It just gives me hope. So then from here, what happens next? It catches me even more off guard as us young guys are looking at these older guys in admiration and appreciation, and they're just smiling as they're taking in these compliments. But one of the guys in his 70s opens his mouth, and he says, he's like, you guys, you aren't the only ones getting something here. This is meaningful for us old guys too, to be able to sit here around this table with you. At this point, I'm just like, what? What's going on here? All in my head, I'm just like, why? Like, why do you guys enjoy hanging around with us? We're a bunch of messes. We don't have any of this life stuff figured out. But anyways, he continues, and he talks about just how much he loves seeing the passion and the excitement that us younger guys bring to life. Just that general excitement about living and being alive. And he continues talking about how that energy, being around that young, virile energy, just makes him feel more alive, and it reminds him of a part of himself that he had almost forgotten. Yeah, this is just one of those moments, like, I don't care if you're religious or not. This was a holy moment. 8 or 9 guys, different ages and from different walks of life, sitting around one table and all plugged in and deeply connected to the same moment, sharing in the same experience of this space that we're inhabiting together and appreciating it from different perspectives. It was just such a beautiful moment. Now we get on the other side of that moment, and this church that we're all a part of, this is a church that was rapidly growing. And when I say rapid, I mean like over the 2 or 3 years I'd been going there, this church had gone from like 200 people in a small room on a Sunday morning to like, 4,000 people plus. They're doing 3 or 4 services on a Sunday, probably adding the Saturday night service, just insane growth. And when churches grow, lots of organizational changes come. And part of those changes at this church was how they organized their small groups. They started following a new small group model. I think they called it life groups. So some of the requirements that they put on the groups were groups shouldn't be larger than 12 or 14 people or something like that. And they should meet on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And all the groups were going to be meeting in people's private residences. So they're now adhering to this new model. And needless to say, our 40-person once-a-month group that met on church property didn't fit into that vision by any stretch of the imagination. So ultimately, this group gets disbanded. And we didn't go down without a fight, in an effort to protect this space, because we were all really attached to it. And I definitely had some hard feelings at the church for making these decisions they did and not listening to our pleas to allow this group to continue. I get it. Things grow, things change, and it sucks, but you got to adhere to a model for some sanity. But it's just a shame that, having a good model for a group often takes precedence over, seeking the magic, the healing magic of community. And it's a lot easier to pursue an adherence to a model than that organic, fantastic, and in a lot of ways unharnessable energy that makes a group a community. But from this experience, it really instilled in me, it really started this appreciation for groups of contrasting people. And the best communities in my experiences, they've always been the ones inviting us to join in our differences and inviting us into a deep respect for each other's perspectives and what we all have to teach each other. Because when you can learn from somebody else's point of view and how they came to that way of seeing the world, it shifts your attitude towards everything around you. Now, in this conversation today, I had the pleasure of talking to Ryan Miller, and he's a guy who started a group out in Denver, Colorado that's called Brew Theology. There's now like 11 chapters across the states. But these are groups that excite me. And the whole concept for this Brew Theology is something I really dig. It's gathering to appreciate the broad range of religious beliefs and human experiences. So they meet in local breweries and they have all sorts of guest speakers and they discuss all sorts of topics all across the theological and religious spectrum. And they've hosted speakers from all sorts of walks of life: Protestant, Catholic, Jewish speakers, Sikhs, Buddhists, Hindus, Gnostics, and they've even had a shaman come in and share with them. It's a cool group where nothing is off limits. They want to learn from everything. I really dig that. So let's get into it here. One brief note, this conversation was actually recorded back in December. So pre-corona world, when people freely met indoors and at pubs. So you're out there in Denver, Colorado, and you're just creating a ton of community out there. And you're doing interesting things. How would you title this brand of community that you're building? Like, what is it? Is it interfaith? Is it post-religious? Or
we've people love to have labels and words to define what you're doing and who you are. So we've been using the word interfaith for a while now. It's not something that I had planned on creating. It's something that I kind of stumbled upon, and it became interfaith, and it became intergenerational, and it became I don't want to say post-religious, because I think all people are religious, but these are people who they've left the conventional, a lot of them, not all of them, sorry, left the conventional religious world that they were once a part of. And it's something that a lot of people in kind of conventional religious worlds probably frown upon, or they don't understand, they're afraid of it. But I love it, man. It's been a blast, and we've been doing this for 5 years now in Denver. And I'd say every week I'm learning more things about myself and other people, which is hard to do, actually.
Yeah.
And, I get to do this.
So post-religious is probably a little too strong. Maybe post-institutional. Is that a better descriptor?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, as I think a lot of people know, I mean, people both in politics and religion are turned off by institutions, and not just millennials. I mean, people are always surprised when they come to our gatherings because they assume that about millennials, right? There's so many things we assume, but these are people who are Gen X, who are boomers. I mean, I was sitting at a table even last night with people in their 20s up into their 70s. So that's also pretty unique. That doesn't exist very often.
No, there are not many good intergenerational spaces. I got to be a part of one of those at a church that I attended like way back in the day, but the structure of the church like crushed the group because it didn't meet their the way they wanted to run the small groups. Oh, but that's awesome. That's awesome that you're doing that, and you're doing all this work under this banner of Brew Theology. That's your organization. That's your group.
Yep.
Now, what does it mean to brew theology? Unpack that a little bit for me.
Yeah, a little play on words there with, we meet in breweries, we drink beer, brew, and as somebody who did home brewing for a while and just as a beer nerd, the process of brewing beer it's actually really simple. I mean, if you just kind of take it down to the science, that part's the easy part. The fun part is when you're experimenting with beers. It's when you're throwing in new ingredients. So when you're, I don't know, if your listeners or you like beer, but, when you first start drinking beer, you drink Coors Light or you drink I don't know, PBR, maybe in college, or Natty Light. Somebody they tell you it's something different, but in the keg, we all know it's really Natty Light, right? It is boring. But then when you get this, after a while, you get this palate, and you start experimenting, realizing that there are a range of even IPAs. There's a range of lagers, there's a range of porters. And so, maybe when you were a kid, you grew up in an institution and they told you that here is your orthodox sort of way of thinking. Here's how you do theology. There's always like an order, a way of doing things. And then whether it's you take your first college philosophy class, or you go to seminary, or somebody from seminary gives you a book, and you start to kind of read and think there's things that, outside beyond the conventional norm, it's exciting. So it's kind of like that brewing process where there's no longer just one kind of flavor, one kind of taste. And so, what we do is we brew theology across an interfaith spectrum, meaning that everything within the Protestant Catholic sort of umbrella, even Orthodox, even things that would be considered cultish, like Gnosticism. But we also do stuff with Buddhism. We do stuff with Hinduism and Sikhism and Judaism. And so, but then even within it, there's nuances within that. So yes, every week there is a specific topic. We've done everything from liberation theology to process theology, all these different topics within the theological realm. But it's not just one. It's not one brew, right? It's not just for one palate. And so what that creates is it creates a people from different backgrounds with an intrigue to expand their palate. So it's like you go to a brewery and you get a flight of beers, and you might not like the IPA and you might not like a porter. Everybody's different, but if you're a beer nerd, you're still going to taste the gauntlet, right? You're going to get an Uber later because you're going to drink a lot of beer. But you're going to respect all the beers on that flight for how they were created, the process. And I think the same thing goes with, getting people together in theological circles where whatever topic it is on any given night, it might not be your jam, but you're learning from somebody else who wrote the content and the people around you who are responding from that content. And I've got a buddy who he'll say, man, I really don't want to go tonight because the topic's just not his thing. But he's like, that's why I'm going. I'm going because I want to be challenged by something that I disagree with and I think's bullshit. I'm like, that's great. That's maturity, if you will.
I was just listening to you and I'm thinking, so often in these institutional, organizational things, we're brewing that ice beer, that adjunct lager or whatever. Just the things that got, like the high ABV, have the most mass appeal for the cheapest and quickest turnaround, Right. So something that takes a little time to unfold and, something that takes a little longer to ferment. I like that analogy.
Yeah. The barrel age sort of analogy is also when you get the char going in the barrel and then you can change it up. And then, it's that process is just, I think it's pretty awesome. I think if we all know ourselves, we're not who we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, sometimes 5 minutes ago. And it's okay to say I'm always changing, just like a good beer in a barrel that's changing.
Yeah. Okay, so you founded Brew Theology in Denver in 2016. You now have 11 chapters of Brew Theology that meet around the country.
Yeah. Actually, it goes further back in Denver. So 5 years ago is when we started gathering a few literal dudes, men, mostly doing Protestant 20th century German white dude theology, because that was our background. and then so those few guys we started organizing, and then I personally love organizing. So that happened 5 years ago, and then it was 2016. So that was 3 years ago. I met a really good friend, Janelle Apps Ramsey, who's a part of the Denver community, and I asked her if she would like to partner and be co-director in Brew Theology as an alliance, as an organization. And so she and I started that 3 years ago and started the podcast, which is a microcosm of what anybody would experience in the pub. And then, after that, more chapters started to emerge, and friendships from people from New Jersey down into the South. And looks like we're going to get our first West Coast coming up pretty soon.
Oh,
so
cool.
We've been going to festivals and kind of putting our swag out there and our brand out there, and just trying to tell people what they could do. And some people want to do it.
Cool. So you have these 5 conversational guidelines that you structure all your group discussions around.
Yes.
Could you share those with us?
I can share them. I don't have them in front of me. So if you have them in front of you,
I do. I wrote them down. I
should have memorized them by now. I can give you. So the problem is, if I start talking, I'll talk like 20 minutes for the first one. So list them out for me, and then I can kind of go from there.
You got it. Okay. So number 1, no soapboxes allowed.
Yeah, nobody gets the last word. And I always tell people, I say, there's a huge difference between a soapbox and being passionate. As somebody who, the one thing I really loved about my evangelical background is the passion. There's again, that fine line between passion and soapbox. So I always remind people in the table that I moderate, I said, please be passionate. Again, just at the end of the night, nobody's going to put a bow on this. I'm not, you're not. We're here to learn from each other. And so that can be hard for people too. Like I've had people who've wondered, isn't somebody supposed to have the last word? This is how things are supposed to be, right? In our country and how we operate. Like, no, you're probably going to leave more confused. And that's okay.
If you leave confused, you get something to think about and you get something to grow with, and dig into more. I think that's really important.
Right. Yeah.
So number 2, respect all others and their viewpoints, even if you think the viewpoint is ridiculous.
Yes. Even if you think that they should not be talking, which can be very hard. This is the one that I would say most people struggle with in general, not specifically our group, but just humans and how we are. But we tell people, like, when you ask a follow-up question to somebody, it's not a debate. And this is to actually, it's to learn from them and extend courtesy by listening well. It's an art form. It's kind of like when you first get married, and I appreciated this about the evangelical world. They told you to go to premarital counseling. So, my wife and I, we did that like 19 years ago. And one of the things I realized that I needed to do is active listening. And so when we have these conversations together, leaning in with a posture of saying, tell me more about that thought. Tell me more about, how you came to that thesis, or how you came to that conclusion, or, whatever it may be. And that's something I think you have to practice. And if you do it in a place like the Brew Theology community, I think ultimately it leads to more mature communities, and I think that can end up changing the landscape of the world around us. I'm also an idealist, and so I think these kind of things can catch on, and people can actually love each other a little bit better.
Yeah, it's almost uncomfortable when somebody expresses interest, because it's pretty uncommon. But I would like for that to be more commonplace. So I think you just covered it. But number 3 is extend courtesy by listening well.
Oh, see, I went right into it.
It's in your heart. It's not in your head necessarily. I've got a lot of quotes like that where it's like, they mean so much to me, and I've been repeating them for the last 5 years. But when I try to think of them, to quote them to somebody, I can't think of them at all. I got to pull out my phone and be like, hang on, I got to find this quote.
Yeah, what is this again?
It's like a meditation. It's not rational knowledge, Okay. Number 4, everything is up for discussion.
Yes. Rabbit trails, rabbit holes. If you just let the conversation take its course, that's how life is anyway. So if you're meeting a friend at the pub or getting a coffee, or you have friends over your house and you're having a meal together, the conversation naturally happens. So we sit at the table with the topics and the questions. So we have about 4 or 5 questions and pretty accessible content front and back that people can read when they get there. So they have that as like their table setting, right? But, if the group starts kind of moving in a certain direction, like let it go there. Now, if you end up talking about, I don't know, the Dallas Cowboys, which could happen if you're at my table, and how horrible of a team they are right now, then, the job of the moderator is to kindly bring people back to, maybe question number 2 to bring them back on course. But I think if we just allow, again, the freedom for conversations to happen, there's nothing to be afraid of there either. And some of the most fun happens when you let the rabbit trails and the rabbits go down the trails and holes, and, don't shoot the rabbit too early,
I think you're onto something with this moderator thing, because so often when I see, people that desire communal spaces in like a post-religious, like post-institutional way, there's this really big aversion to leadership, like in any form really. But I like that, like the table moderators. It's not like, put the air quotes here, leadership, but it's offering some guidance so that the best work happens.
Yeah, and I think what I've experienced at these tables, and a lot of times I will be at a table and I won't moderate, and that's a lot of fun too, and I can just kind of sit back and be part of the group. But whether I am moderating or I'm sitting and talking, after about, I would say, 20, 30 minutes maybe, because we do this for 2 hours. We have a break after an hour and then we come back. About 15, 20 minutes in, I mean, the moderator doesn't have to do as much work. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But the initial stuff is kind of getting the people going, and hey, welcome. Let's go around the table and introduce ourselves. All that can be a little awkward at first, but man, eventually people start settling in. And I think probably the beer helps too after you get your first beer down.
Oh, of course. No, and I think it's so important too, like in group settings, to have that first person to kind of, take a step into the water. Or else everybody's just kind of nervous and like, I don't know if this is necessarily safe. I'm gonna stay in my own container.
Yeah, it's scary when you're face to face with people that you don't know. Every week it's going to be a new experience based on the table dynamic. No week's ever the same. So it's like starting over again. So every now and then you'll get in a group where you're like, man, like it's all people that and sometimes those are the other groups you got to be careful for. Like you actually need to moderate better on those nights.
Yeah,
you get too comfortable.
All right, so number 5, I'll let you fill in the blank here. Don't be a
asshat, dick, douchebag, whatever word. We say jerk officially because it's a brand and we have it out there. But if people have listened to our podcast and heard enough words that have been used throughout the last couple of years. So actually, our Jersey chapter on their signage, it says "Don't be a douche," and I was like, "Oh, of course, Jersey fits the stereotype," and throws that out there. I think our group likes "Don't be a dick" at times, but I'm still putting jerk on the sheet of paper since people are coming in off the street.
All right, so concisely go back through those. We got no soapboxes allowed. Respect all others and their viewpoints, even if you think they're ridiculous. Extend courtesy by listening well. Everything is up for discussion, and don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
So for you, personally, what do you find is the hardest guideline to embody in your conversations?
The hardest one, wow, it would probably be maybe the soapboxes. I think that's probably why it's number 1. I mean, I was a pastor at the local church for many years, and so we were taught and trained how to soapbox. That was part of our religion, is to soapbox. You're trying to convince people that this is the way, the truth, and the life. This is how you're supposed to think and believe. And so it doesn't matter if you come from an evangelical, Protestant, or Catholic tradition. I think atheists and Buddhists, everybody under the sun struggles with soapboxes. That's why I always tell people, give yourself permission to be passionate, but you're also here to learn from somebody else tonight. That's just the hardest one in general for people to live out. And there's a group of us that goes and we hang out afterwards, and that's not like an official group. It's an unofficial. Everybody's welcome, and so we have like a community after the community. We go out, after we gather formally. But
I think that's a really important part of community.
That's when we soapbox.
I think that's a really important part of community, is like the community that happens after the community, Yeah. I think that's a sign of healthy community. When it ends, and it's like, hey, we should still hang out.
Oh yeah, and I'm like I've had to tell people, I say, hey, we have to leave the building because these bartenders want to close down. Breweries shut down at a certain time, and I'm looking around going, man, we've been finished forever, and there's still people talking, and I love it. That is a sign of good community for sure.
So what's your background as a pastor? What tradition do you come from?
So I was trained and raised in the Southern Baptist church world. So that's where I got my start. That's where I was licensed. I could quote you Bible verses left and right. I could, if you want to get baptized right now, we can do that. No, it's part of you, man. It's part of it. And I'm not somebody who hates my heritage or bashes it. Every now and then I've been very critical, and there's a reason why I left that part of my tradition. I mean, I've not left the Christian faith. Some would say I'm no longer orthodox to their standards, but it was the women in ministry aspect that got me early on, where in the SBC world, women are not equal to men. Only male leadership from senior pastor to, I guess, the deacons and all that are allowed. So I early on, and even in college, I had big issues with that. But at the same time, I learned a lot from my Baptist tradition. I still, part of my label is of the Baptist tradition. I have this kind of fun label where I'm an evolving Anabaptist Methodist Pentecostal with an open tent. So it's still part of my theology, but it just doesn't. There's definitely some things that I disagree with culturally and theologically with the Baptist tradition.
Did you ever go through a season of being angry at the tradition you came from?
Being angry?
Yeah. Or being more critical?
Definitely more critical. I think I've chilled out quite a bit. I have to have grace on my old self, and I'll tell people that a lot who get so angry and rage against the machine of their tradition. Some of that's helpful and necessary and therapeutic, but eventually you got to come to terms with that, sit in it, and I think so. Otherwise, I think it can get really ugly, and you can become a toxic person. Because what happens, and I've seen this often with people who are in progressive Christian circles now, is that they kind of become the person that they were on the other side, And so they begin hating and bashing and well, you're really no different from you were when you were a hardcore fundamentalist. Now you're just a hardcore liberal.
Just the other side of the fence, yeah.
Yeah. And I think I know your listeners probably. I mean, some of Richard Rohr talks about that quite a bit, and he's been pretty helpful over the years too.
Oh yeah.
Trying to transcend and include and get past the binary and looking at the third way. Rob Bell's been digging into that too and helpful in that department. But My criticalness is kind of chilled out over the years.
So how your group functions, you have one guest speaker a month, right?
Yeah, every 4 weeks.
What comprises the other 3 weeks?
So what we do is we tackle a topic 2 weeks in a row. We call the second week a remix week. So when a speaker presents a topic that's just like any other new topic. And then so next week we will take the speaker's content and we will remix it for 2 hours in different small groups. And I think what that does is it gives people who want to revisit it a second time another opportunity to do so after a week of letting that brew within you, and with people who are different, because the table's going to be different the next week. And that was important to me. I mean, every chapter is different. We're the only chapter that meets every week. And that's fine. I've told people, I said, if you want to build community, at least meet every other week. If you do once a month, it may happen, but it's going to be really hard if you just meet every 4 weeks. I mean, yes, again, giving people the opportunity. People love to talk, man, and they want a space to do it. And
Oh yeah, we need it.
Yeah.
So, tell me a little more about this network of groups that you got going.
Yeah. So we what we do is we provide the branding, we provide some social media promotion, we give them leadership guides, curriculum, moderator guides, and a troubleshooting Facebook leadership page where everybody can kind of come in and, hey, what's working, what's not working, that kind of thing. So it's a shared network. We're saying, hey, if you're a self-starter and you've got people around you to help build the community, do that thing however it looks in your own world. And I think that's the beauty of it, is that you start hearing stories of how, even though there's the same skeletal picture for all of these chapters, they will take a life on its own. And I'm not surprised by that, because I think that's how humans are. I mean, I've worked for multi-site churches, 2 different ones.
Got the satellite church.
There's the main campus with the main speaker, and then it gets fed to all the other ones. And there's campus pastors at each one. And so I think that what makes this different from that is that this is not a feed-in. This is not a satellite feed-in. This is not a copy-paste. We say, no, your local chapter is special to you. It's unique to you. So You pick when you want to meet, where you want to meet, which content you want. And so a lot of the chapters, they write their own content. They don't even use the content. We have, gosh, I don't know, 100, 200 curriculum at this point. I mean, so much. And yet some people are like, well, they'd rather write their own on a given week. So like, that's fine. That's cool.
Does some of the chapters use the recordings of the monthly speakers?
No, they don't. Nope. No.
That surprises me because I've watched the speakers you have, and there's so many that look so cool coming through your. I guess you can't say coming through your doors, but coming into the pubs and hanging out with you.
Yeah, it's been a blast. And then they come back over to the house, and we hang out in the basement, and we record a podcast. Like I've gotten to meet and be friends with different faith leaders and theologians, just like from so many different rich backgrounds. So it's been a blast for sure.
So what's been the single most meaningful interaction that you've had over the course of building this Brew Theology project?
Man, you're going to ask me that question? It's like asking me, who's your favorite kid?
Okay. Pick one.
It depends on
the one that comes to your mind the most quickly. Not playing favorites.
Single interaction. Man, this is a tough one. How about this? I'm gonna, as far as content, I'm just gonna do content, and then because I can talk about so many different people that I've come to love over the years. But we've had her on the podcast 3 other times, and she's an amazing professor at Iliff School of Theology. It's Pam Eisenbaum, Dr. Eisenbaum, and she's done Paul Was Not a Christian, Bible 101, and Judaism 101, or is the Bible true? I think that was what it was titled. And every time she's come, and then the following weeks, we remix the stuff with a full 2 hours. And man, I tell you what, those were like some of the most rich conversations, just because Pam's background, so she's Jewish, and yet she is a specifically trained in New Testament studies, Pauline theology specifically as well. And so it blows people's mind. And here's the funny thing, by the way, her husband, just as cool, Mark George, he is a Christian who is a Hebrew Bible scholar. So like they flip-flop roles. And I can't imagine that dynamic. It's just fascinating. And so when she comes in with that perspective, that Jewish Eastern perspective, everybody who has grown up in the Christian world, which would be most people because they grew up in the United States, their minds have been flipped. And so those conversations are like extremely enlightening to, unpack this thing they grew up in a whole new light. And then regardless of what they believe about God or Jesus or the Bible, like figuring out what that could have meant like growing up and what that means now looking forward. So Pam Eisenbaum, huge influence for so many of us around the table as well. And then we've done, so this is just me being the community guy that I am. Like, I'll do barbecues at the house. Although some people like to call them cookouts or grill outs. I mean, everybody's got like an argument about what that is. So that's like about fighting words.
I've heard you even build a barbecue pit in your garage, and you roast a lamb, right? Like on the spit.
That has happened.
I've heard that's gone down.
It has gone down, and that was probably a bad idea because our garage was made of wood up top, outside of the brick on the side. But anyway, it did not burn down.
Oh, okay. So nothing bad happened. It was just a bad idea in retrospect.
It's a bad idea.
I thought I was going to get a good story there.
No. Can you imagine if that happened? Wow. So yeah, having these gatherings outside of what we do, and part of our rhythm in the summertime is in Denver we take about 5 to 6 weeks off just to kind of regroup. It's the summertime, people are on vacation. But we don't take off. We still have activities. We go to Rockies games. We'll have cookouts. We'll just do things that are just a little bit different. And I love hosting that stuff in like my backyard. People come over, so I think that's when again you're getting people outside of just the pub, to even more relaxed environment and hanging out a little bit longer around different tables. And so that's been fun. I mean, I had mentioned earlier that some of us meet out after the gathering and. Those conversations, because we do the weekly thing, community flows out of that naturally. And so I think that what what I get to do and what I get to manage, if you want to use the word manage, I've created community just by being somebody who loves people and loves to organize. And so it's hard to say there's one thing because there's so many people and so many circumstances. But I gave you the two, gave you Ken Massenbaum, and just talk a little bit more about how much I love community.
Now, maybe you just answered this, but I was also going to ask you who's been the crowd favorite speaker?
Yeah. Well, that. She's kind of a fan favorite, Pam. We've also got a good friend. She's a Buddhist reverend at the Tri-State Buddhist Temple, Diana Thompson. She spoke 2 or 3 times, and she's just been a part of our community as well. So she's been a lot of fun. And because a lot of us aren't Buddhists, for a while she called herself the token Buddhist friend. But I mean, it's just kind of cool to she'll look at us, some of our stories, and she's like, "What?" Like, yeah, that's how we used to think. And she's like, "Oh my goodness," or she'll say, "Oh my Buddha," I said, "Oh my God." But yeah, there's been so many. I mean, we really, I'm going to use the word blessed. Been blessed with just a lot of amazing people, speakers, content writers. Yeah, even, gosh, I think about our friend Mark Donato. He did a podcast on Gnosticism and spoke, but he's a part of our community. And so he's a part of that. He's an oblate in the Johannine order, which I didn't even know existed.
That sounds serious.
I didn't even know that was a thing. Yeah. And so we all grew up thinking, oh, Gnosticism is just a cult. So we studied it for it being a cult. And here he comes in from that's his Christian experience. And so he's a part of our community. And it's just hard to say what person or, so like I said, so many, man.
Who's been the most controversial speaker?
Well, we had a shaman come in, and I don't want to say it was controversial. I want to say it was the biggest stretch for me personally, but also for other people that was just not part of their world, not part of their worldview. And so we'd had Muslim and Jewish rabbis and all the stuff that we've all studied, the main top 5 religions. But then we bring a shaman in, and now people are like, "Whoa, what is this?" So that was wild, man.
Tell me a little bit about that. And, I hear this word shaman thrown around, but I don't know what it means officially.
So Andy Murphy is called the Rock and Roll Shaman, and she's based out of Denver, and you can look her up. She did a podcast with us as well. And so it's like an energy thing. I'm trying to think. So from my background, we would have thought it more of like New Age and earthy, and she's able to experience things on a sixth sense kind of level. It seemed, though, if you want to put a box on it for somebody from our background, it seemed Pentecostal, not much different from a lot of Pentecostal stories that you've heard.
Huh.
But just with a different framing, right? Different words, different, and she's talking more about the earth. And I don't want to put labels on her as far as she's not Wiccan. There are Wiccans out there, and we even did a topic on Wiccan. But it's more in that direction,
I'm gonna have to look that up because I've always associated shaman just kind of with village elder and wisdom, not exactly what you're saying. So I'm gonna have to do some research and get educated.
She senses things in colors and communicates with plant life, and so that's her experience. And so when you're hearing that and there's no background knowledge, it is talk about just eye-opening and mind-blowing. So I don't want to say it was controversial because, like I said, we're open to pretty much anything, right? As long as people aren't jerks up there. And she was, such a sweetheart, such a kind spirit, so much knowledge that I just didn't know what to do with. It was overwhelming for me. And so that would be that one. And then I would say controversial for the group. Anytime we've done Islam, and I think because people have an idea of what that is based on news cycles and the country that we live in, and Islamophobia. Our group is not an Islamophobic group per se, but when these speakers come up, they're very much aware of the feed that we've been given, that we've been presented in the Western world. And so, not controversial in the sense of like things went awry and wrong, but just it was a more complicated process, and I think extremely helpful. I learned so much about the Muslim community by having different Muslim speakers, and even somebody who's as progressive as a Christian as I am myself. Like, it was helpful for me to then get face to face with somebody who, like, they practice this in ways in which is not embedded in my unconscious, you know.
What's been the biggest conflict that you've encountered in this space?
Well, I could talk about another chapter. Let's do that. There was a night in one of the chapters where immigration came up. Kids in cages and the whole 9 yards. And then, man, it's getting pretty heated and passionate. And so one of the guys at that table was adamant about the law, the letter of the law. Here's what it says here in the United States. And the other person in the group was very much, you could feel the tension arise. The horse, if you will, was awakened. And there was a little bit of like, oh, things are going to get ugly here. From what I could gather, I wasn't there. This is all from somebody else's perspective. And they kind of went back and forth. And one of the guys who was like defending the children, just out of a compassionate heart, kind of painted the picture like, what if this was my kid or your kid? Kind of like got personal with the guy. And the guy was like, no, it's the law. And kind of stuck with it. So the dude stands up, grabs a full pint glass of beer, throws it at the guy, and walks out. Walks out the pub. I can laugh about that now just because, we troubleshooted, and I talked with the leader, and we like, hey, has this ever happened? And I was like, no, man, let's figure out what to do. That's never happened. So they kind of contained it with just, that group. Like, there were apologies that were made. They didn't make a big, huge announcement about it to the whole group because people who weren't there didn't even know about it. And the person ended up apologizing to the other person. And it was one of those deals where,
okay, so he came back.
Okay. Yeah, it was like, this can't happen. This can't happen again, kind of deal. I mean, and they knew that. They were like, we just want to make sure. I mean, at the end of the day, like, that could have been pretty dangerous, right? I mean, glass could have been flying across the table and all that jazz. You got another story about that, by the way.
Hey,
here in Denver.
Oh, is this the bartender?
Yeah, well, I can't tell you what bar that is.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say chapters or bartenders under the bus. What bars? Were you there for that night?
That was one of the nights I was there. I was like waiting in line for my beer, and there's like probably 5 people in front of me. And the dude just takes the customer order, turns around, chucks an empty pint glass at the wall, and then just very calmly hands the customer their beer.
Yes.
And everybody's kind of like, what do we do?
Man.
Like,
that was wild.
I want my beer,
but
this guy's batshit crazy.
We had a lot of people that night too. There was a big line. I think the guy was mad at the fact that he was the only one serving. Started chunking pint glasses against the brick wall, and talk about scary. So I called the owner up, and that guy was fired pretty much instantly.
That's the only time I haven't tipped my bartender.
Oh man, that dude was like literally he was dangerous. I was afraid to go get a beer after I saw that. He's choking pint glasses against the wall. Never in my life of going to pubs and bars and breweries have I ever seen something like that. And yet, I guess you could say that's controversial. People came back though.
that was conflict for sure.
Yeah. Controversial. There's been people who have challenged some Muslim speakers with their very slant. They got the Quran out, they're quoting passages. And people who are they're one and done. They've shown up because they see that we have a conversation on Islam, and they want to prove their point as a fundamentalist on the other side. So which we could all do that. I mean, you and I could go into a Christian speaker based on our experience and start quoting the Bible and doing the same kind of thing. So
yeah,
and we've got such great moderators now where other people will take these people aside at the break and say, listen, this is not who we are. You're here to learn, and you can disagree. That's fine, but like, you're not here to soapbox and tell the speaker that they're wrong and quote stuff at them. And that's annoying. And what's really annoying about it is it takes away from the whole group. And these are people who, they have an agenda. They come in, they go out, they never come back again. Like, what are you even doing here?
Yeah.
Like basically, and I've even said this before, because I would say, well, all are welcome. We've used that statement. I go, really? That's not true. Not all people are welcome. If you're going to do that, we don't want you here. We don't serve your kind.
Well, man, you're doing cool stuff. Keep up the good work. And
Thanks.
so you guys just got your 501c3, right?
We are in process of that paperwork, which is it's a lot.
Yeah,
it's coming together. It's coming together.
What?
I know we've been dragging our feet for 3 years now. It's time.
So Crash Course 101. If somebody is hearing all this and they're like, you know what, I might want to start up a Brew Theology chapter, what do they need to know?
I mean, yeah, starting new chapters is fun, and I would encourage anybody out there listening, if they know somebody in some city, town where this would work, give us a ring and email Ryan or Janelle at brewtheology.org. And we have a covenant code, if you will. Now, it might scare people when they hear that, but it's really simple. It's kind of straightforward. And that, we are an open and affirming community of communities, so straight, LGBT plus, male, female, trans, black, white, everybody belongs here. We have people sign it because I'm afraid, Janelle's afraid. This is just a natural fear that somebody could take our name and our brand and misuse it, and then next thing you know, Brew Theology is racist, or it's sexist, or it's shuns atheist, or you know what I mean. And so this is just one of those things. Hey, if you want to be a part of this, this is not a bait and switch. You're not pulling people in to convert them to whatever faith that may be. Again, it kind of from the get-go creates an intentional interfaith community of communities. So that's the one thing. Just sign a sheet of paper saying, yeah, we're good to go here. And then after that, this is when I say the money part comes in, but it's so laughable. Netflix is more expensive than being a chapter. It's as little as $5 a month. You can you could be a chapter. You can have a logo. You can have access to the leadership guide. And so it kind of goes up to we make it a sliding scale from 5 to 25. I've forgotten all the levels of it a month. We make it really accessible. And one of the things that is important to me and Janelle, because we come from, and we still are, pastoral in our heart of hearts, is that I want people to have access to us. They can call us, they can email us, they can text us. And so we, I guess, are resources in and of ourselves. And yeah, I mean, it's all kind of spelled out on the Brew Theology website of kind of levels of partnership. And then, we just kind of get people going and give them the materials and give them the branding and hope and pray, or wishful think, if you will, that, they have the things in place to get them going.
Awesome. How can people find you? I'll put it all in the show notes too.
Yeah, we are at brewtheology.org on Facebook and Instagram at Brew Theology, and our Twitter handle is the only one that's a little different. It's brew_theology. All the information's there, and there's a Facebook group which is different than our page. So that's an interactive page for people. For anybody out there who's on Facebook, yep.
All right, well, since Ryan and I recorded this conversation, obviously the pandemic has set in. And shortly after, Ryan actually wound up relocating back to his home state in Waco, Texas. But that hasn't stopped Brew Theology. It's still exploring faith and pouring pints. Like everything else right now, in a digital environment on Zoom. But Ryan's still involved. He's still doing his thing, just like the rest of us right now, from a distance. Well, I will see you right back here in 2 weeks' time, and we will keep cruising through the rest of Season 2. And until next time, stay safe, stay sane, but most importantly, stay curious.